we're all made in God's image and likeness, but all differently. And so to some extent, auditory might just always kind of bug you more than it bugs your husband, but something else probably bothers him. So it's finding that fine line of this could actually be modified a little bit more so I can tolerate better versus this is who I am and that's okay.
Welcome to This Whole Life, a podcast for all of us seeking sanity and sanctity, and a place to find joy and meaning through the integration of faith and mental health. I'm Kenna Malay, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm happy to bring you this podcast along with my husband, Pat Malay, a Catholic speaker, musician, and leader. We invite you to our kitchen table. Okay, not literally, but you're definitely invited into the conversations that we seem to keep having once the kids have scattered off to play and we're left doing the dishes. We're excited to share this podcast for educational purposes. It's not intended as therapy or as a substitute for mental health care. So let's get talking about this whole life.
Now, I'm not gonna stand here with my friends down and out. I'm not gonna run when...
Welcome back to This Whole Life, everyone. It is so good to have you back with us and to be a part of an episode that's a little different from our most recent episodes. I'm here today with Caitlin Russ, an occupational therapist, a fellow parishioner of ours at St. Joe's in West St. Paul, and a domer, an Irish alum. So welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking as we were getting ready for this episode on the gift that occupational therapy can offer for mental health, that in my own world, and I think as yours with your 4 kids, soon to be 5 kids,
yes.
That at the beginning of summer, we are all maybe looking for some strategies of like, how do we transition? Like my red, angry, fire-breathing dragon is like, she's just like so ready to come out of her cave more often right now. And so I was like, this episode is well-timed.
Right? You need to think about what tools do I have for this transition time.
Yes. And so I'm really excited that we are going to do exactly that today. We're going to talk through tools coming out of the field of occupational therapy and just what it has to offer us, the way it intersects with mental health. So excited about this. For those of you who do not have the pleasure of knowing Caitlin like we do here in the Twin Cities, she is an occupational therapist who spent many years in the pediatric outpatient clinic, as well as with older adults in transitional care. As I said, she is a Notre Dame alum, studying Catholic peace studies there, and then went on to St. Kate's University here in the Twin Cities for her master's in occupational therapy. So I know that, Caitlin, you are currently a great asset to our parish school, St. Joe's, helping their teachers understand how they can incorporate more of this knowledge and awareness of the many systems that are going on and helping to regulate our children. So thank you for that, all in addition to your role as wife and mom to, like I said, 4, soon to be 5 Russes. So welcome.
Yes,
welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Good. Well, okay. So at the beginning of our episodes, Caitlin is just kind of a warm up and a way, especially for our listeners, to get to know you and to get to know how life has been for you lately. We talk through a high and a hard. So if you're willing, I'll put you on the hot seat and you can share first.
Sure. I'll start with a hard. As you mentioned, I'm soon to have 5 kids, so I'm currently very pregnant. And I've really been thinking about how a hard for me is just the physical carrying of the baby and all that goes with that, the exhaustion and not being able to do what I'm used to doing. And it relates well to what we'll be talking about now is my body regulation is just not the same. And recognizing that and allowing myself to rest when I'm usually a go-getter and do all the things. And that's not my role right now. So that transition time has been really hard. A high, though, has been my family just went to South Dakota for a week-long trip as school got out. And it is beautiful across the Black Hills and the Badlands. And we just loved exploring with our kids.
Have you done that before?
So my husband and I have been post-college, but never with the kids. And it's such a different vantage point when you have, a 9-year-old, 7, 5, 2, you just really see it from a different way.
Yeah. I've heard it is beautiful. Pat's done some traveling out that way. We haven't gone as a family, but I've heard it is underestimated. You know, people think of the coast and they're like, nah, it's snooze town. And actually there's a lot of natural beauty out there.
The beauty, and it's all very different. So there's the dead Badlands with hardly any growth, and then you get into the Black Hills and just these tall trees and rolling mountains. So if you have a chance to go, do it.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Well, for me, kind of picking up on that theme of creation, let's say my hard, and it's maybe a kind of a silly hard, but I tried my hand at gardening from seed this year for the first time.
It's a challenge.
And a friend was mentioning that she does it, and she's like a California native with a lot of family in Mexico. And so she's just like, yeah, this is what we do. And I was like, well, and she's like, you can literally just buy a pack of seeds and try them in Dixie cups. Like you don't have to like buy a greenhouse.
Sure.
You don't have to be, Joanna Gaines overnight, like building an empire of gardening. And so, but it has been this spiritual exercise of acknowledging, like, I do not have control over all things. Like I can like will these little baby tomato plants to like get bigger, or I can hope that we get X amount of rain, but I also need some dryness so that the roots don't rot. And at the end of the day, it's not for me to control. And so, the beginning, Pat was like, wow, you're just really investing a lot of energy into this and I think I'm settling into my groove. Check back with me in like 3 summers and hopefully I'll still be at it and better with it. But I think it's just, it's uncovering some like areas of growth and surrender, that I'm still in need of undergoing, pursuing. My high has been actually this week. Pat is out of town and he's gone for 5 days at Catholic Heart Work Camp in Illinois, which is awesome because it allows him to be connected to the world of youth ministry. He's very passionate about the value that service has for youth, right? In a developmental stage where it can be very easy to turn inward and become self-focused. That's a lot of criticism of teenagers. That service and making it attractive and helping teens to see that it's a lifelong, that Christ calls us to this, to love the least among us. So Pat likes being involved in ventures that support that, and Catholic Heart is one of those. So it's great that I can like feel good about where he is, but the real high is the way that our kids have really risen up. And we talk them up big before he leaves of like, we are a team. Mommy's going to need you. There are going to be things that you're asked to do that you didn't make that mess. You didn't leave that out. You don't need that peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but like, I'm going to ask you to make it. And I really need you to just step up and to do what is asked of you. And I promise I will do my best to temper that with times of relaxation and joy and all of that as well. So they've done it, and we're on day 3 of 5 and we are living to tell, and they are having a great time at Vacation Bible School with you, Caitlin.
Yes.
And so I think, it's been a good mixture of highs and hards of their own. But I don't know. I'm constantly amazed at how much our kids are capable of, if we can scaffold them and help get them there, which maybe is an entry point into what we're going to talk about today. So that is a high, and just kind of stepping back and being like, wow, like they really are doing this. Like they are living the Christian life of being selfless and loving others. So that is a definite high. Okay. I am, as we turn the corner here into talking about occupational therapy, I am recognizing that we have 3 kids who have been beneficiaries of the world of OT. And when it was first suggested to us, I was literally like, what are you talking about? No one was in an accident that rendered them, disabled or, having difficulty of recovering or anything along those lines. Like, why would we go to OT? And it took a while for Pat and I both to kind of get on board, to be honest, and to understand like how this commitment to occupational therapy for our kids would be beneficial. So I'm just wondering if you can help us, like, can we define this? Like, can we just, like, what the heck are we talking about here?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question because when I tell people I am an occupational therapist, I get a lot of blank stares. People wondering like, well, my kid doesn't work or it's not about my occupation. So what is occupational therapy? And the reason I was drawn to occupational therapy is it is so broad. So you can work with infants all the way to the elderly and dying. You can work with people who are high functioning and really, like you're saying, there was no accident, there was no diagnosis. Or you can work with the people who are very clearly in an ICU and have a clear need for it. But either way, the role of occupational therapy is to help people find meaning in their daily activities and to help them achieve that with good health and good attention. It's a largely problem-solving field of you're not fully participating in your daily activities to the amount that you want to be. So how can we help you get to that point? So with a kid, if it's a kid who has attention difficulties or sensory issues, how can they engage in play and eat and dressing themselves? Or if it's someone who had a car accident and has an orthopedic issue, how can we help you get to the point where you can put your pants back on even though you're in this large cast? So it's problem solving. What daily activities are you struggling with right now? And how can we get you to that full potential again?
Well, and I think that as I was observing what the OTs were doing with our kids, I was especially realizing like it didn't need to be an extreme circumstance to benefit from understanding how the systems of your body work, your nervous system, your senses, the toll that taking in, sensory input has on you. And as I would say, high functioning adult, like I was finding that I was starting to incorporate a lot of the things that we were learning in OT with our kids, not just so that we would kind of normalize it within our family. That was a big piece of it too. But just for me, for Pat and I, and we were starting to talk about like, whoa, these were things that maybe were underdeveloped skills and resources inside of ourselves. And so, for those who are listening, if you're like, I don't have kids or I wasn't in a car accident or whatever, like, no, I am telling you, like there is gold here. And a lot of it overlaps with mental health. I think about kind of this burgeoning area of mental health around grounding and mindfulness. It's about being aware of what is literally going on around you. And I think OT is so much about that, about being connected to the task at hand or the setting that you're in. And how do I adapt? How do I manage? How do I cope so I can flourish, as you were saying?
Right. I think that's exactly it. I think when people ask me who could benefit from occupational therapy, every single person can benefit from OT. If you think that you're running through your life and you can do every activity you want to do at 100% with no problems, then maybe you're the one person who can skip an OT.
Who are you?
But also, what are your secrets to life? And otherwise, if not, if you ever have a hard day or this one activity is just, you can't get to it 100%, there's some gem in OT that can help you learn that and figure out what's going on in my body so I can connect my brain, body, spiritual, all well-being to really be 100% at this activity.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that I remember one of our sons, OTs, saying is she said, just the way that certain things are set up, and I don't honestly have the technical terms right now. I think it was some disintegrated reflexes. She was like, simple things like hearing the white noise chatter in a restaurant, for you, that's a 2, but for him, that's like a 6. And so if you're in this, out of 10, and so if you're in this state of, like this hum, like, the littlest thing, like your brother taking your crayons or, your bike tire being flat when you're ready to go play at your friend's house, like that is going to send you through the roof. Like just that was so helpful for me to understand, like, we, outwardly, maybe a person seems perfectly fine, but we don't know what's going on inside in the intricacies of their system.
Well, and sometimes they themselves don't know what's going on, right? Like you hear that white noise and you don't think I'm really focusing a lot to tune that out. And then you hear a louder noise and it really sets you off, but you didn't realize your body was working so hard to not listen to that white noise. So it's really being aware of your own self and what sets you off, even if it isn't a visible, that definitely bothers me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So start us at the beginning, like give us the foundation. What, for the alien that just has arrived on the planet and they're like, OT, what is this? What do you want them to know? What are some foundational blocks so that we can build some practical skills into this conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what we're coming back to a lot of is regulation. So that's a section of occupational therapy, but I think it's really important because you want your body to be regulated no matter what you're doing. So when I say regulation, I mean it's your body's ability to attune to the task at hand at the appropriate state of attention, the appropriate cognitive level, the appropriate emotion, the appropriate fight, flight, fright response. So you want your body to be regulated in a way that you can do that activity. So to be regulated in a way to sit and study for 5 hours is going to be different than to be regulated in a way to run a marathon or to cook or to care for people in your household. And so when I am looking at regulation, there's different levels of regulation. So there's the cognitive. Are you using the right thinking and choices? There's the emotional. Are you appropriately responding sadly or happy or frustrated? And then what I really like to tune into is the sensory regulation. So how are your body's senses tuning into that task and either tuning things out that they don't need to be paying attention to or focusing on what there is. And what I really love about OT is we talk about not just 5 senses, but 8, which kind of throws people for a loop.
Yeah, what the heck is that?
So you have your 5 senses that you learn in kindergarten, right? There's the sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch. But then beyond that, we have a few senses. One is called proprioception. So that's not touch as in, is this scratchy or smooth, but it's touch as in, how hard am I touching something? So you can think of proprioception when you have a friend who's a really hard hugger. They might not, like, that hug isn't as fulfilling to them unless it's a really hard hug. And then you might have the person who's barely tapped and it's just so jolting. So they have different levels of perceiving that. And then there's vestibular, which is your sense that tells you where you are in space. So it's how people get car sick or more dizzy on different rides. So vestibular is all in the inner ear, and it kind of helps you regulate just that you're sitting still and not spinning round and around. And then the last one's interoception, and that is your body's awareness of how you're feeling, if you're hungry, if you're tired, do you have to go to the bathroom? So it's that concept of recognizing your body's inner cues to do those basic needs. And that one's always interesting to me because you have someone who is really hungry and they just don't notice it, but they're starting to get more angry and right, the hangry concept. Well, they just need to eat and they'll be okay. And some people are much better at acknowledging that and going with that. And then others, maybe not so much. And so it's just, we all have different levels of being able to process these sensory input that contributes to regulation.
And so then the idea of regulation skills is to make that more manageable, less taxing. Is that how you would say that?
Exactly. So if you look at the brain, there's Dr. Dan Siegel, who writes a number of books. I really like the whole brain child. He talks about there's the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. So your downstairs brain is your brain that's the limbic system. That's that fight, flight, fright response. So that's the system that's taking in the sensory input and doing something about it right away. But then you have your prefrontal cortex, the upstairs brain, and that's the part of your brain that is not fully developed until into the 20s, right? So kids are still working a lot at this. And it tells your body, okay, I see that there's a flashing red light, but I don't have to run because of that light. But I do need to run if, there's a fire over here. And so regulation is connecting that upstairs and downstairs brain to let yourself know, I'm going to perceive all this sensory. I can ignore these things. I should do something about these other things.
So regulation is making sense of the cues that the downstairs brain perceives by using the upstairs brain to make decisions, choices,
Exactly.
follow through on things.
Right.
Okay. And so if there's no staircase between
if you're
the
not
downstairs
connected
and the upstairs, we can look a little chaotic,
Right.
Or we can look out of place in a
Right.
certain setting, in a library. If I'm acting like I'm at a rock concert or the Indy 500, then that's going to look odd. But if there's no staircase, there was no way for that to all come together. And so you're saying OT helps to provide us the skills to like strengthen that staircase?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Gives you
Okay.
tools to make sense of it. It gives you tools to understand one person's staircase is going to look different from another person's staircase. So I might be able to handle a lot of visual input, but not auditory input. And you might be the opposite. And the way our stairs work to connect that upstairs and downstairs differ.
Yeah.
But there's tools to help us both in navigating a smooth staircase as opposed to one where we're missing 3 steps.
Yeah, right. I'm leaping. Okay, so the image that came, or the thought that came to my mind is Pat and I take turns on weekdays cooking dinner. Like it just depends on who picks up kids from school and then gets home first, basically. And so oftentimes I'm coming home later on his days to make dinner, and I'll walk into the kitchen and he's got, if it's spring, summer, he's totally got country music playing. If it's, in colder seasons, it's kind of grab bag. But he can do that. He can follow a recipe, manage kids with, that dinner hour is just bananas, manage the kids with their needs and their requests, and also have that music playing and enjoy it. And I come in and I'm like, I can't think straight. I'm like, I got to just shut this off. And he's like, oh, no need to beat the phone. Just, gently just pause the music. But that makes sense. That sensory input for him is just really registering differently.
So so he appreciates the extra auditory input. It can help regulate and calm him. But for you, the extra auditory input just puts you over the edge. So we all have different sensory profiles of which senses we can tolerate more of and which we can tolerate less of.
Yeah.
And you can think of it as a kind of a bucket. So everyone has a bucket where all their sensory stuff gets put into from the start of the morning. So they wake up and, how itchy your shirt is being put on is a certain sensory input. And how bright the sun is that day is a sensory input. And some people have a really big bucket and it doesn't matter what you throw at them. They can take it. Some people have a really small cup, and if they don't do something to help relieve how much sensory has been put into them, they're just going to overflow. And some people are almost like a colander, and it's just draining out. The more you put in, they just need more and more. So those are the people who are just the high energy, need to run, fidget, and you're
Is this like every toddler we know? Or?
There's a lot of 2-year-olds that may fit this category. And so everyone has a different need. And so all of our regulation looks different to that extent.
Okay. So when you say that music while making dinner for Pat is actually helping to regulate him, but it is a source of dysregulation for me.
Yeah.
That is fascinating to me. So do we have hope to change that? Like if I'm born with a small cup, can I ever hope to have a big bucket? How does that work?
And that's a great question, because I think in some senses, yes. So there are different aspects of occupational therapy that can help expand your cup to a bucket. There's different auditory tools we use with kids who are really, anybody who's really sensitive to a fire alarm and it just completely shuts them down. There's different ways occupational therapy can help address that. But also it's really great because we're all made in God's image and likeness, but all differently. And so to some extent, auditory might just always kind of bug you more than it bugs your husband, but something else probably bothers him. So it's finding that fine line of, this could actually be modified a little bit more so I can tolerate better, versus this is who I am and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So perhaps like I'm thinking about a lot of clients who will come to us because they've had some kind of life change or transition that is presenting them with maybe a new setting, new demands in their job or in their vocation, and they're struggling with that change and transition, to use your language, like to stay regulated in the midst of these new expectations or demands and things like that. So you're saying, yeah, like OT could help them perhaps, I mean, also talk therapy is what we do here. We don't do OT here. Don't be confused. But that there could be ways in which we could widen, Dan Siegel's words, the window of tolerance, widen that out, and also maybe some alterations to the setting itself to make that thing more tolerable.
Right. So looking at those adaptations, maybe the light is too bright. So how can we dim that in your office so that you can focus a little bit better? But the other cool thing about this sensory processing and regulation is that you can also do physical things or maybe have a different taste, like a mint or a lemonade that can help either regulate you to a higher state of arousal or lower. So there are ways you can change what you're doing to adjust in those transition times. And a lot of it's trial and error, what works well, but there's also known aspects of sensory that are more calming across the board or more rising of arousal across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, let's talk practical for a minute. And I'm thinking like the average Joe or, Sally listening, that are going, you know what? I'm like generally bopping along. I definitely have my moments of stress. I have my moments of, I blow up at my colleague or my neighbor or my significant other or whatever. Like what kinds of things could we just even be suggesting to help people, get to know their staircase and how strong, sturdy, smooth, I can't remember the words you were using earlier, but that all goes, if they're like, I don't even know where to start.
Right. So for me, at least, it helps to look at when I feel the most dysregulated. And dysregulated is when you're stressed. If someone brings in one more thing to tell you, you just can't handle it. After the fact, in the fact, it's going to be hard to identify. But after the fact, look at what was that setting of that day like? And not necessarily what was the moment when I got pushed over the edge, but how did my build up to that go? Was I sitting all day and not moving my body? Were the lights really bright all day? Was there a lot of extra noise that day? Was there more time in the car? That's that vestibular input that kind of makes you motion sick. And you can kind of look at it as this volcano picture of you get a lot at the bottom and slowly you fill up this volcano heading to the top. And so all that sensory input that's coming in throughout the day is affecting you, but your upstairs, downstairs brain are connecting it okay and telling you you'll be fine, take a deep breath, keep moving. But then you get home and country music's on and you just lose your mind.
Yes.
And so it wasn't the country music that sets you over the edge. It was that your volcano filled up all the way to the top. And the country music was just that one last drop that pushed you over.
Yes.
So taking an inventory of the whole day, and you might need to do this over a week and say, oh, whenever I spend an extra hour in the car, I'm pushed over my edge, or whenever I haven't moved my body enough, that was a day where I got pushed over, or, the conference room was extra noisy that day. That put me over. And when you see these consistent things that maybe didn't bother you in the moment, but they're always there, that might be something that needs to be looked at then.
So I'm hearing you say being attentive to the cumulative effect of these different sensory stimuli that are coming in for us. And what I think, is for me, the connection to mental health here is because then people come in and say, I've got an anger problem. I've got an anxiety problem. I've got a depressive problem, which absolutely we can help and support some of those symptoms too. And also I'm finding that some of these OT things that you're talking about, especially around regulation, are supports that can go, can we get back to baseline? Like, can we figure out what really where the mental health lies and how much of this could be controlled for with some kind of beefing up of skills, strategies, maybe some adaptations, some changes to things. Like, that's the connection to mental health for me.
Absolutely. I think the reason I was drawn to occupational therapy after also having studied psychology was that psychology seemed so much just in my mind, and there was not that hard, tactile, bodily experience of it. And then when I discovered occupational therapy as something to study and pursue, I realized, well, it's all connected. Your mental health is how your body is feeling, right? Because a lot of mental health, different diagnoses can come through in a stomach ache or a headache, or it's your body experiencing it. And so if your body can display symptoms, then your body can also help to ground you and find a way back to your baseline and comfort zone.
That place of regulation, groundedness, being able to be present to what's going on in the moment. Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, so I'm thinking back to what you were describing a moment ago around being aware, not just of like, that was the moment that I really lost it. And that's that's when I knew that I had an anxiety problem, but like looking again at that cumulative effect of all those things. And yeah, like what wisdom there is in being able to kind of classify like what are, or to notice, I guess, like what are things where I do seem to be more calm, do seem to be a bit more grounded, do seem to feel like more my true self, like my authentic self. What are things where I'm putting a little more effort? Like, yeah, I was able to get through that meeting, but like, oh my gosh, the room was sweltering and that buzzing that was coming from the closed circuit TV up in the corner was just about to make me crazy. Like, yeah, I could muscle through, but to look back and kind of give ourselves, like acknowledge, I guess, what we've asked our system to withstand, to tolerate throughout the day, that would be helpful, like an inventory of sorts.
Sure.
To notice these things. So that feels like a soft challenge by choice, even just a little bit there of like journaling that, being aware of that. As you were talking through some of those things, I know for myself, the difference between driving to work at 7 a.m. when there's really not a ton of folks on the road yet, and I have a 30-minute commute. And so like, if that can just be easy without a lot of weaving, without a lot of slamming on brakes and looking at traffic ahead and checking my GPS for arrival times and all that, versus even just 7:25 when like way more folks are heading into the city, just the difference that takes, and like how maybe we could say how many balls I've already put in my bucket just on my drive.
Right.
That those aren't things that we are accustomed to noticing.
No. And your body and brain are trained to tune that out. You just address it and you keep going. That's how we get in that autopilot, which is good. If we were tuning into every single jolting in and out of traffic and every single light that we saw along the way, we wouldn't make it past 8 a.m., right? That would just be the end of our day. So our body should tune a lot of that out, and that's part of regulation. But when your body's constantly regulating through the whole day, that's when it just really takes a toll on the body. I think about it as I'm currently largely pregnant, and I have to remind myself my body is spending all day either tuning out being kicked in the rib or having to go to the bathroom or just being exhausted. And so then it makes sense at the end of the day when I feel a lot less patient with my kids. Well, I don't have that same space in my brain and regulatory system as I do when I'm not this far along in pregnancy.
There's just more balls going into your bucket on the daily, and not by anything you can do differently except adjust maybe some of these other inputs. Okay. Well, let's keep talking on the practical realm. Like, what are other things as people are maybe starting to take inventories, listeners are noticing like, okay, there's this, awareness that, I am less able to be present, to be regulated when I get home from work or when I'm, having one-on-one time with folks at the end of a day. What kinds of things can we do to help ourselves take these breaks from senses or metabolize some of this sensory input?
Absolutely. So I think it largely depends on the person. Again, what bothers someone is different than what helps soothe someone. But thinking about, like you said earlier, when do I feel calm? What is going on in that atmosphere? I think that God has given us the great gift of nature, and across the board, nature is one of those calming, soothing areas for the body. When you're looking at things up close, your eye muscles are working far differently than when you're looking at something far away. So that balance of looking at something up close, but then looking out your window at work, it really helps regulate the visual system. And then being able to move your body, that proprioceptive input of carrying something heavy or just walking farther along, is much more calming than just sitting still in the same static position. So taking a walk outside. And I think a lot of the push towards you should be really active and get outside a lot.
Get your steps in.
Right. Like it's that cardio. What's the health? It is healthy for you. That's not wrong. But I think if you can look at it in terms of, no, this is actually regulating. It's not running 5 miles a day, but getting outside and hearing different sounds, the nature sounds versus the buzzing of the monitor, or the smells of outside and not just like the stale inside. All of that really is regulating. And right now, as we're heading into summer, it's much easier to say than when it's negative 20 outside. But there is this truth and beauty of God gives us what we need, and we just need to step out into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Got to engage it.
Mm-hmm.
I think so often about how folks, can come to therapy and after hard work and X number of months in our offices, they'll be like, so when am I going to be fixed? Like, when am I never going to feel anxious again? Mm-hmm. Or when am I never going to have a down moment or have another intrusive thought? And I'm like, no. The goal of you being here is to help you establish some habits and to really let some skills become more muscle memory, allow you to know when to engage them. And so I'm hearing you say there is no like magic easy button to press, but we've got to be aware of and utilizing some of these kinds of skills, and nature being a huge one,
right,
for us.
And beyond nature, I mean, we can't always step outside. We're stuck inside. There's different senses we can tap into within our confined area where we are. So this is varying for each person, but if you need to alert yourself, having something sour or crunchy or really chewy, engaging those senses can really help alert you to something. And then calming techniques are something sweet. And, it's that when you think of foods that you eat that kind of like, oh, I want to curl up on my couch now. That's a much more soothing taste and texture versus I just bit into this lemon and I'm ready to go. I can hear what you are saying 100%. So thinking about foods you eat or smells that you smell. Is lavender really kind of put you to sleep? And does peppermint really alert you? And think about those different things you smell, taste, see, hear. What music helps you focus? What doesn't? Are different techniques you can use then throughout the day to say, I need to be much more alert at this meeting versus I need to just calm down so I can handle the dinner chaos that's about to hit.
So when you were talking about taste, I remember I had an intern that was shadowing me, and I was getting ready to start a session, and I got out a pack of peppermint gum, and I took just like a little bit. I didn't eat the whole piece, but I took just a little bit. And she was like, "You're going to chew gum during your session?" And it didn't even occur to me that was odd, right? That's like kind of weird when your job is talking, right, and being heard clearly, that you would put gum in your mouth. And I was like, at the moment, I couldn't say why it was, but I was like, I just know that I am more attentive, that the session, like I just feel able to be more present when I have a little bit of gum tucked in the back of my mouth. Yeah. I guess I could also maybe use like a breath mint or something. But as I'm listening to, I'm like, this is connecting dots for me. Yeah. Like that helps me to be, because otherwise sitting in my cozy therapist chair, it could be so, especially if it's tele, oh my gosh.
Sure.
A virtual session, it's so easy to kind of fade off. But like, it helps me, like I'm even just sitting up taller talking about it. My body remembers that. So yeah. So are you saying that, there are some kind of universals, like lemons being more stimulating, arousing, and, lavender being more soothing, calming. Like there are some universals, but really people just have to experiment and be willing to try things out for themselves.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's some universals you can see. Weighted blankets are all the rage right now. That is a real and true thing. It's giving input to your body that's heavy and weighted, that is calming and can help you sleep. But you're still going to have, I got a weighted blanket for one of my children thinking this is going to be it. It's going to keep him in bed. And it did not. He couldn't handle the extra weight. He just wanted to kick it off, and it made it way worse. So there are universals, but we're all made differently. And that's a really great thing, but also can be frustrating when you're trying to find that perfect sensory profile of this is what I need to be exactly and it changes based on what your task is too. One thing it's going to work for, and another time it's just going to distract you.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking about, how at this Whole Life podcast, we are wanting to provide information and skills for a full life, right? St. Irenaeus says the glory of God is the human person fully alive. And so that addresses the reality of this human corporeal, carne, this meaty experience that we have. And so when people, want to be more patient with their children, their boss, their colleague, when they want to have more to give in terms of, pouring themselves out in selfless service to others. Like these are it's like, how can this be connected? Well, it is, because you won't have a lot of self to give. You won't have a lot of capacity to rise up to maybe the call that the Lord has if you aren't attending to these really human things. Maybe that sounds like so far-fetched, but for me, sometimes I'm like, there are levels of attention that we need to give when someone's looking at their life and going, I want more, I want to be more, I want to receive more, I want to, feel more. This is one piece of what someone could consider if they feel like they're not really living out full potential.
Absolutely. And I think it's exactly that. If sometimes it feels selfish to take that piece of gum for yourself or take that extra walk, but this is truly what our bodies are asking for. And you see little kids whose upstairs, downstairs brain are not fully connected yet, but they still seek out those things. So the kids going to play in the mud, or the kids spinning on the swing. Well, their body is telling them that sensory, I need this input if I'm going to attend to the next playful thing I'm about to do. So giving into that body need and desire really is good for the whole mental health and whole being, because it does allow you to focus better on whatever task at hand God has put in front of you.
Yeah, because he often asks hard things. And I got to have room in my bucket for all those balls.
You do.
That he's asking of me. Okay, so you bring up kids and, acknowledging that there are a lot of folks who are listening who are providing care to children who, like you said, do not have a fully built staircase yet.
Yeah.
Or top floor, really. And so in their roles as parents, as teachers, as aunts, as, godparents, uncles, grandparents, like what kinds of things can they be mindful of? Can they be thinking about when it comes to our kids who can't do for themselves all the way yet?
Right. Yeah. So it's a really important part. So we've been talking about regulation. So we have self-regulation of tuning into what we need and then making the right choices to get that. But kids are not fully developed in that brain connection area. So then occupational therapists talk about co-regulation. So that's when the caregiver is looking at what behaviors the kid is displaying and saying, okay, I think you need this, and then showing them. So it's not as simple as talking to a 4-year-old and saying, let's take deep breaths, because 4-year-olds are not going to take deep breaths with you. But kind of using the language of, I think your body looks a little wiggly. Does it need to go to the bathroom, or do you need to jump around? And kind of working with those kids and saying, I see this. What does your body need? I think it needs this, and kind of giving options. And that continues into the teenage years, right? So there's the kid who's just sitting there fidgeting. Well, maybe that kid hasn't been able to move his body yet, and he's 14 and he's made to move. So where can we allow these circumstances so that they can move and get the sensory that they do need?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying like using our own upstairs, right? So
Right.
really our own downstairs, upstairs, because I'm perceiving with my downstairs brain what is going on with this child. I'm seeing them be wiggly and then connecting that to my upstairs brain. And my upstairs brain's like, ooh, I know that when they're showing me behavior, it's very likely that they need something that they're not getting. And so then to kind of experiment, check it out, try some different things, see what feels good and helpful. When you were giving your weighted blanket example, we have some kids who really love, in our family, who really love the weighted blanket. And that was an experiment, that we were trying to figure out, and how much weight, was helpful. And at what times, in the day was that helpful? Is it during nap time? Is it at bedtime? And, everything in between. So when we are co-regulating, to let our own, more developed, connected upstairs, downstairs brain, to be able to get curious with that child and to try things. You also mentioned, even through teenage years, our oldest is 13 right now. And one of the things that we are finding is as an introvert, so I'm guessing her sensory profile will be pretty high, maybe on, a lot of the senses maybe, but particularly auditory. And like, whoa, she is the leader of the pack of 7 really rowdy children. And so she is finding that after school, before she even sits down to do her homework, she goes on a half-hour walk, listens to all instrumental music. She loves to be the orchestra conductor, and she just walks down the neighborhood street conducting with her little baton finger. And then she comes back and she can zip through her afternoon routine, right? We are talking, she practices 3 instruments every day, homework, chores, helping out with siblings, cleaning up her room. She's captain of laundry. Like, I mean, legit, the girl has a lot to do.
I need her at my house.
Well, yeah, no, true. But like, we have noticed that her demeanor, her ability to move through that. I mean, she was doing it before. I'd say it's probably been 6 months of these walks. She was doing it before, but it was not with the same kind of ease and like self-initiative that we've been seeing lately. And so I'm like, yeah, there's a whole lot that's been good about that for her. And I imagine it's touching on a lot of the things you're saying.
Well, and that's a great example of she's using that walk to not just reset everything that has been put into her up until that point, but she's using that walk as a basis to then set herself up for success in her future routine. So when you're looking at these sensory needs, it's not just reactive. I see that you got pushed over the edge. How can I recenter? But proactive in, okay, I'm about to send my really fidgety son to school today, and I want him to not get in trouble with the teacher. So maybe I could tell him to go shoot 20 baskets outside at the basketball hoop to get that proprioceptive input and that outdoor nature input proactively so that he's setting himself up better for focus. And it really is, as a caregiver, a trial and error, because what works for one kid is not going to work for the next. But you kind of know which kids need to move their body more or need that instrumental walk where they can kind of just zone out a little bit, and you pick it up as you go. But it is all trial and error. And as kids are moving from different ages, what they need varies. And they have all this regulation issues going on of their bodies growing. So just going through a growth spurt alone can set off behaviors. I think what I love about occupational therapy is I might not be able to fix it all, and I might not have the exact answers, but I have this better understanding of one of my sons, whenever there's a time of transition, school to summer, summer to school, he's going to act out more. But just knowing it's because all this regulation and sensory input has shifted, I can expect it and at least be more prepared in that sense.
Yeah. No, and I'm thinking about, kind of similar to your example, one of our sons his OT asked, before school, can we have a routine? And it was, some days it was being on the sensory swing. We have like a sling swing.
The best.
That gave a lot of pressure and allowed for, he loved spinning. Like that was great for him. Some days we did things with the big balance ball, like the exercise ball. We had a game where I would roll, pretended ice cream scoop, and we'd roll it across his limbs and down his core. Other times it was chewing, like needed gum, like after breakfast would chew and just get that oral stimulation in. And it has, you're so right, it has changed so much over time. And so it's work as a caregiver to be attentive to those shifts and those changes and to notice those. But I think when, there's maybe some acting out, or I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm getting feedback from his teachers and other caregivers that they're frustrated, like that's a good indication of like, okay, what might the behaviors that have been disruptive or unwanted by others, like what might that indicate that this person needs? That can be, a good sign.
Well, and I think it's remembering just that is behaviors is children's form of communication. So they're not going to sit there and say, I'm really nervous about this huge life change that's about to happen. Like that vocabulary just it doesn't flow, nor does it flow from adults very easily, right? Like
again, that lower and upper.
It just doesn't come. And, for adults, it might be because we're just holding it back and we don't want to say it. But for kids, they really just don't realize that this is making them nervous. So then they're acting out with different behaviors. So being able to recognize behaviors are more so just seeking a different sensory input or some cognition to help process it. Then you can kind of think through it and you realize that you can't just tell a kid to stop doing that. You need to say, instead of that, let's keep our hands to ourselves and give them a tight squeeze instead of pushing right? And it's the same for adults. If your spouse comes home and is just in this terrible mood, maybe saying, did you eat lunch today, in a very caring manner? Because maybe they just have that input of I'm hungry, but they're past the point of hungry. They just jump to anger. So kind of helping each other realize, oh, this behavior is actually this basic need that I have.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it doesn't, how do I want to say this? Being attentive, right, to the sensory needs and to this awareness of input and where am I at with being able to regulate, or how can I help my child that is in my care co-regulate with me? It doesn't diminish accountability, right? At the end of the day, I still have to be accountable for my behaviors, my choices, kind of the way I'm steering my life. And also, God has given us this sense of agency and this empowerment to go, well, let's like eliminate maybe some of the factors that are making it hard for me to be a kind, patient, compassionate, loving, generous human when I get home from work and Pat's playing country music in the kitchen. And instead of just, ripping his head off about it, like what are those things? For me, and maybe this comes as no surprise now that I've told you all this, but I do not listen to music in the car.
Right.
I said, I have a half-hour commute each way. In the morning, I'm usually praying a rosary, but on the way home, even I am just literally letting the chatter of the day, and there's so much chatter, like just kind of fade away. And I'm preparing for the next round of chatter.
Absolutely.
Because I have 8 people who really want to talk to me. So yeah, I'm loving this both and too, of like, we can both engage these skills, these awarenesses, utilize some of these practices and still hold ourselves accountable for, am I making great choices with these resources that are accessible for me?
Right. Yeah. Think about what does calm me. Am I seeking that calming thing out? Like I know a 5-minute walk around the block will help, but I chose to scroll on my phone for 5 minutes instead. And that visual stimuli definitely set me off more. So being accountable of, we do have these needs. Are we addressing them? It doesn't have to be an hour-long nature hike, but just, did I step outside, put my phone down, and look at the trees for 2 minutes? It can make all the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Or even like, what kind of fuel did I give my body today?
Yeah.
What kinds of things did I offer it? There are certain days where I know that it's going to be a challenging day, and I strategically choose more comfortable clothes.
Absolutely.
You know, like I've got certain things that it's like, I'm going to be adjusting, I'm going to be pulling and tugging and straightening and whatever. And I'm just like, I think maybe subconsciously, like my body remembers and is like, oh, that outfit, too much work. Like we don't have time for that. Like we are going at breakneck pace, and there's a lot of big, heavy lifting to be done around the office. So we're going to wear something comfy. So
That's exactly it. It's that's the tactile input, right? Like I know that one shirt has that tag that really bothers me. And if you don't have to tune into that itchy tag all day, you have a little more space to
in my bucket,
you
more
can do
balls
it.
can be in that bucket. Okay. So I'm hearing a couple things kind of rise out of this, Caitlin, and then maybe we can turn the corner into your challenge by choice if you've got something for us. But so one is just noticing, like embracing this reality that we are individuals, that God has created us uniquely and beautifully. And also, by the way, that means it's work, right? Like it is work, and there is no magic answer. You can't just click on some website and it'll tell you exactly what your sensory diet and routine should be.
No one size fits all.
Yeah. Yeah. So that if this is something that feels like, this could be helpful for my flourishing as a human, that my relationships, my relationship with the Lord, myself, with others, my attentiveness to my vocation, whatever state of life I'm in, could really benefit from more of my presence, more of my ability to really be receptive to what God is asking of me in those places. If you're thinking about considering some of these skills and strategies that Caitlin is sharing, it starts with noticing. So that's one piece. And then the second is, to look at, and maybe Caitlin, if you've got some resources that we could link up that give the definitions of the different, particularly those three senses that are newer to us, that could help us to identify, what are those more activating, arousing kinds of input, what help calm, in all of these different senses, just to get to know yourself. And then that piece of really being challenged to follow through, to be accountable, and to go, you know what, I'm a grown up. And if I want to live this full life, I've got to cooperate with the way that God has designed me. So so what in a challenge by choice, can you narrow that down maybe even more?
I mean, you kind of had the full challenge by choice laid out paragraph form there.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No, well, you synthesized it much better than I could have.
Oh man. Okay, well, recap it for us again. How would you say it?
The challenge by choice this week is to look at over the week the different sensory input that you have taken onto your body and what caused you to get pushed over the edge and what brought you back down. So did you go on a walk that calmed you down? Or did you listen to music too loud that set you off over the edge? And really try to tune into what are three things that do push me over the edge, and then what are three things that can reground me or set me up for success for the day? Is it morning yoga? Is it a good cup of coffee in the silence?
Yes.
What do you need to set you up in a sensory regulatory way to just let you be 100% ready for that, whatever God's asking of you that day?
Yeah. Okay. That is beautiful. So we will write up that challenge by choice as always in the show notes as well. And we can link some things.
Absolutely.
Some resources maybe that you have for us. Because I imagine that there's a lot of this that as OT becomes more kind of commonplace and people are learning more about it, it's becoming prescribed way more often for adults and children, that there is just more information out there.
Yes.
So let's help our listeners tap into that. So why don't I pray for us, Caitlin, to wrap out this episode and we can finish up here. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, for all that it has presented to us, for the different ways you have spoken to us through our senses, through this created world around us. Thank you for the ways that you've spoken to us through our own reaction to that. You are always teaching us about you and about ourselves each moment, each day. Thank you, Lord. I give you thanks for Caitlin. I ask you to bless her work and the ways that she desires to help other families, children, adults to really flourish and to know a life of meaning and of purpose. And I pray that that's what can come for us, increasingly so, in listening today. We surrender all of our work to you, Lord. We hand it over to you and trust that it will glorify you. And we place all of this at the foot of the cross in your holy name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Caitlin,
you.
for giving us the time and just giving us a peek into this wealth of knowledge that you have. So we will continue to pray for you that your work blesses those that you get to serve. And thank you, listeners, for being with us today. I imagine there's someone that you know who could benefit from hearing this, that they themselves or someone that they want to help co-regulate could benefit from this message. And so would you be so kind as to share this episode with them, to subscribe if you aren't already, to get on our email list at thiswholelifepodcast.com so that you'll know exactly when these episodes drop, because there is awesome stuff just like what you've heard today still coming. And until next time, God bless you.
You're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone.
This Whole Life is a production of the Martin Center for Integration. Visit us online at thiswholelifepodcast.com.
You're not alone. You're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone.
It does not seem to be registering on here. Check 1 2. Nope, it's not registering.
Does it have mine at all?
No,
Nothing.
it doesn't. So let me think this through. Okay.